ho! There we go. I was muted. That's a real good catch. Welcome, everybody. My name is Anto, coming to you live from the end of the world, now unmuted. And this evening, we're going to be doing some collaborative world building for the setting for my upcoming campaign, my next campaign, the Jewel Cities of Talavar. We've already done a little bit of work on this last week. And you'll see down in the bottom of the chat there, which will be down here for you somewhere, you'll see a little gold coin. Now these are gold crowns. You get these for being just in the stream and watching, and you can redeem them for some perks like being able to help name places, add NPCs to the world or suggest NPCs, drop monster layers, which is a thing we're going to be doing a lot of, and some other cool stuff. So if you accumulate some points, go ahead and spend them and get some of your ideas into this world as well. So I'm going to go ahead here and make sure everything is all set up properly. I'm going to make sure that I am fully in frame and check myself, make sure all of the notifications have gone out all hunky-dory. I just double added everyone in the Discord server because the good bot posted after I did. Got to remember about that. And let's have a look here and see how we're looking. 15 of us here so far. That's real good. Switch back over to OBS so I don't have to watch the delayed feed from Twitch. So as I say, this evening we're going to be doing some world building. There's going to be a whole bunch of back and forth. I'm going to be picking areas of this world to kind of go and play around in, and you're going to get to be able to give ideas and feedback and help me kind of brainstorm the kind of things that my players are going to encounter when they start this campaign. Only other last bit of housekeeping for the start of the stream is like here-ish, you're going to see a follower goal for 175 followers, which is our current goal. So if you aren't already following the channel, go ahead and click that follow button. It's free, it helps pump the numbers up, it helps feed the algorithm, and helps people find these streams, and I would greatly appreciate it. That went down the wrong hole immediately. Okay, so let's get started with some world building. So I'm going to switch here to my desktop view so you can see the map of my world. Now this is an online program called Legend Keeper. That's what I used to do all my campaign management. The map was made with Incarnate. I really should make buttons so I can answer that. Those are probably two of the most commonly asked questions. But you can see I've got a whole bunch of regions for the Jewel Cities of Talavar, and we've already started populating a whole bunch of stuff. We've got several distinct nations here. We've got the remnants of a former empire, the Dusk Empire. We've got the Unclaimed Lands, which is a land of jungle and swampland filled with monsters and dangers. And then over on this island here, we've started developing some areas there. We have the Vale, which is up here, which is physically cut off from the rest of this island, very insular, very defensive, and they're all about worshipping the Maiden, who is like the goddess of love and peace, and that's their whole deal. Then over here we've got Eruxis, which is another jungle filled with lizard folk, very apprehensive of outsiders. They have a single road that leads through their region to let travelers through, but beyond that they don't really let non-lizard folk into their territories after a whole bunch of bad experiences. And then we have Eildal, which is a kind of Western European medieval allegory. It's got knights in shining armor, it's got all those kind of classic tropes that you'd expect to find. And then we've got the wider world. So the empire stretches all the way from this little jutting section and then all the way around and up as far as Last Watch. Then we have a big old desert up here that stretches off into the north. And then if we go ahead and hit the world here, you can see this is the region in which the Jewel Cities are. There's our little island and the Dusk Empire and the Unclaimed Lands. And that is all part of the continent of Talavar. And Talavar stretches all the way across here, and the Empire, the Dusk Empire, will have once claimed most of this continent in sort of a former life. but is now a shadow of its former self. So we are going to be doing a whole bunch of world building for this evening. The very first thing that I need to do is to pull up my request queue and make sure to add the request from last week. So in last week's stream, Flip from the Flop wanted to put down a slard layer. So I'm going to do that very first thing this evening. We're going to put down some slard. So the way I've been doing this is you can see here on the map a bunch of these transparent little orange icons, and those are all monster or beast or encounter locations. So my approach for this has largely been crack open the Pathfinder bestiary, the monster manual, whatever it may be, choose a really cool monster, and then look at the map and go, where could that live? Bob redeemed a monster lair for Desert's Howl. That is a really cool name. I really like that. We're going to do that immediately after we've done some slard. So when I think of slard, I think of the Chaos Phage and their kind of tendency to corrupt and infect. It's something that I've already incorporated into my current Ashk campaign. We had a whole campaign arc with the Chaos Phage and the slard, and the players have some familiarity with that concept. So I'm thinking having a phage bearer come from the Nation of Ashk and end up over here makes a lot of sense, which means that they're going to arrive somewhere in the southern regions of here. Era, subscribe to Tier 1. Thank you very much. So they're going to have come following the trade routes and things. They're going to arrive somewhere in the south. So we're looking somewhere between Shale and Coal, kind of this band of the Jewel Cities. Probably it's going to be, if we zoom in here, it's going to be either Pearl or Glamour. Those are two of the most popular first destination cities as you arrive on the currents, on the ocean currents from the south. So it's going to be either Pearl or Glamour. So I'm just going to roll a d4 for this, I think. I'm going to go onto my stream deck here. So it's going to be Glamour. Make sure I'm right in the back place. I mean, there may be spoilers. I don't know how spoilery we're going to get yet. So in Glamour, we want to have a slard lair nearby. So we're going to go ahead and drop a pin, and we're going to type out slard. And then we're going to choose our quest template, make it a hidden page, place that, and then edit our pin, hide the pin as well, and edit it to match all of our others, which are orange. And then we're going to have that just there for the moment. And then if I open up here, you can see I've got some basic templates set up here for what we want. And we're going to go ahead and just make a secret note here that this was redeemed by Flip from the Flop on stream. Just so I know where some of these ideas have come from. So we want a slard layer. So slard that has come from Ashk, because that's where the slard have made their kind of last point of entry into the material plane as far as we are going to be aware of for this campaign. Maybe that some time has passed in between, but right now we know that they're in Ashk, so they've probably come from Ashk and arrived in Glamour. And begun spreading the Chaos Phage. So certainly at this point, that's all we really need in terms of general ideas. My whole approach for this so far has been throw a whole bunch of pins down on the map with general ideas so that broadly the players can go, right, okay, let's go anywhere to start the campaign, and there's going to be stuff around. So at the moment we've got some kind of bald spots on our map, and that's what I'm hoping that we can kind of fill with this world building streams, is kind of fill in some of those bald spots. But the goal is to be able to say, here are a list of the nations in the Jewel Cities in and around the cut, which is this band of water, this strait here. And the players can just go, okay, this area sounds cool. Essentially throw a dart at the map, and there'll be something there to spark some ideas. So let's go ahead, and Bob has chosen a monster there, Desert's Howl. Is that a Pathfinder monster? Let me go ahead and do a quick Google search. It is Desert's Howl, monsters in Pathfinder 2nd edition. If the Archives of Nethys wants to open, we're going to leave that running in the background and maybe loading. It's from the Lost Omens Monsters of Myth. I have that book. Okay, I've got that book. That makes things real easy. So, Desert's Howl, page 18. Let's have a gander at the Desert's Howl. It's a real goat-looking dude. So we can. Oh yeah, that's menacing. Like, that's a menacing dude right there. Yeah, I'm here for that. Okay, so Towering Grey Abomination. Ibex horns, that's cool. Claws. People have survived the desert the longest when the Desert's Howl first appeared. No more than a human. So it is in a desert. That just gives me an idea of where to put this thing. So let's have a look and see what we've got around here. So if we go ahead and look at it on Archives of Nethys, it is a level 19 creature, so it's big. It is a huge size, which is pretty boss. It's a unique creature, so we know that it's going to be more substantial than just a random encounter. It's got a whole bunch of cool stuff, and it's nightmare fuel. Okay, cool. Introduced to it by Vivid Dreams. Okay, so that's cool. So we want to know where we're going to put this. So let's have a look at what we've got. We've got some gnolls, some ogres, a linorm, and a gash, elephants. So I think we want somewhere out in the desert. We've got some mesa here, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose that. Desert's Howl. And we're going to knock hidden page on that again, and then we're going to edit our pin, make it the right color, hide the pin, and then same as before, we're going to make a secret note of that. By Bob. Turpin? It is Turpin, yeah. Okay, so we know that the Desert's Howl is a unique creature that causes vivid nightmares. So there needs to be, we're going to have some kind of village nearby. There needs to be a settlement that is being plagued by this. Affecting a nearby settlement. And then we want to go Desert's Howl, so we know that that's level 19. So then we just choose a spot for a location. Maybe if we go ahead here and turn on pin dragon, and then drag this pin up a little bit, and then turn it off, and then we can go ahead and we'll make a city here, some kind of desert city. City of the world, location, there we go. So we know at some point we're going to have to make a city in this location. Actually, let's not use a generic marker for that, because we want to make some notes about this city. So we'll just call it Nightmare City for now, so that we know what it is. And then we go location template. We go hidden pages. Then we create that. We change our pin. Our city pins are per play. And then we hide that because we don't know everything about it yet. And we want to make a secret here in Legend Keeper and make a note of Desert's Howl. And then we know that they're connected. We need to, if the players come up to this region and they say we're going to go to the city, whatever it ends up being called, we know that it's going to be plagued by the legendary and unique creature, the Desert's Howl. And that's broadly how we're going to approach filling in this entire map. Is cool idea, place a pin, figure out if it creates any other pins around itself, like knowing that this creature needs a settlement around it to propagate, placing those pins, and then tying it all together. We make it sound so simple. So since the last stream, I have done a little bit of work on this region. So probably the biggest thing I've done is name the continent Talavar. So now we know that the Jewel Cities are the Jewel Cities of Talavar, because it felt strange to me to not have a name for the place that these cities were a part of, which led into some interesting kind of follow-on developments from deciding that. So like I mentioned in the last stream, one thing that I've been doing with the build-up to this campaign setting, is trying to figure out language divide. So rather than just having common apply to everything, I want specific pockets of common that might share a little bit of understanding, kind of basic information, but I want the players to feel that difference in language going from one place to another. So a lot of the places here will speak Talavar Common or Talavari, and that will be just kind of the default for the region. But then we have the Unclaimed Lands, where they speak Ngawe, or we have Orexis, where they speak Orexi. And we can have some other places where they have a different common language, which helps those locations feel more distinct and more unique and more alien to the players. So if they only speak Talavari and they go into the Unclaimed Lands and meet a bunch of people who are speaking Ngawe and they have no real common language, that adds a different element to it that could be fun to explore. One of the knock-on effects of deciding on the name for a place, there really is a power to naming a thing. So it led to a bunch of development work for the Desk Empire. So I knew that I wanted this to be an empire in decline, an empire somewhat in retreat, and to be led by an empress. But I didn't know a huge amount beyond that. But then deciding on the name for the region, Talavar, unlocked so much, and it made it so that I could kind of stumble into the fact that this, what is now known as the Desk Empire, would have been the foundational, or maybe not foundational, but the main kind of faction in the Talavar continent for a good period of time. So for hundreds of years, maybe. Time is a little bit flexible in this regard. The Desk Empire will have conquered most of Talavar and united the continent in kind of a combined subjugation. And that's what the Emperor of the Desk Empire came to be known as the Subjugator. And that led me kind of down a path of, during this period, during the subjugation, almost all of Talavar was united under the single banner of conquest under this empire. And then in the Empire's darkest hour, when the people of Talavar had had enough and started rising up against this empire, the subjugator's wife and the empress betrayed the subjugator and fled back across the continent, back towards the Cut and towards the Jewel Cities, with a slowly dwindling army over the course of like a decade, because it's thousands of miles together. And that is where we find the empire in our kind of modern day in the Jewel Cities. So the subjugator is dead, or maybe not, We've got some room to play there. We just know the subjugator has been betrayed by the Empress, and the Desk Empire has kind of fled back to the Jewel Cities, and they're in kind of their twilight. Hello, Flip. I have added your Slard location. I've dropped it down here near the city of Glamour, because that's where the Slard would likely arrive from Ashk. So as I was saying earlier, there are Slard in Ashk. That's the only currently known location where they exist. So if they were going to come to the Jewel Cities, they'll probably have come to Ashk, from Ashk to the Jewel Cities via boat, and landed in Glamour and set up route there. So another thing that we've got for our Desk Empire is titles. So we have the Empress, who is also known as the Betrayer Queen, because that's a really cool title, and also known as the Lady of Desk, kind of presiding over this twilight, this dusk of the Empire. I also did some work in terms of religion for this region. So this is a big empire, even though it is in its kind of potentially dying days. It still occupies like 1,500 miles. It's still, a big stretch of land to occupy. And trying to think of how religion would interplay with that, I thought that given that so much of the Empire's force was built out of the subjugation and this one dictator-like figure right at the top, it didn't make sense for there to be a state religion. So I decided on the Empire having no state religion, and part of the agreement for being part of the Empire is that you place no thing above the Emperor or Empress, above the leader of the Empire. So no gods or kings come before the subjugator previously, and now the Betrayer Queen. People are still allowed to express their personal religions, which means we still get to have a lot of interplay with the religions of the setting, but it means that we don't have one monolithic religion that takes up a huge swathe of land. Era says, are the royalty the most prominent family on the Isles? So each section of the Isle is going to be made up of different kind of governments. So the Empire goes from this area down here all the way along up to here. But then down in the unclaimed lands, it's hundreds of tribes and smaller kingdoms, each with their own kind of individual rule. Then over in the Vale, that is ruled by the Maiden Queen, and currently it would be a group of kind of steward lords who rule until the current queen is of age. And then the rest of the island will be broken into multiple different nations. Like the map, this is a pretty big map. Let me check the scale again. So we've got 125 miles in this stretch here. So we're looking at sort of 1,500 miles across. So it's a fair old size. So there's going to be multiple nations here. They will have some things in common. So a lot of them will have a common language. They'll speak Talavari Common. But then they'll have a lot of things that make them unique. So there might be nations that are monolithic in their worship, like the Vale. Almost everyone in the Vale worships Cardia the Maiden. Or down in Aeldal, they have a real focus on Hagen the Warrior. Not so much from a worship standpoint of, this is our religion, this is a one true God. More of a standpoint of, hey, we're all knights, we all like hitting stuff. Hagen's the guy for that. So it will depend on the region as for who's the most important. CO of Decks, what's that for a website? This is Legend Keeper. It's a campaign management tool, and the map was made in Incarnate. Bob says, does that not mean they don't do this secretly? In terms of, do you mean the Desk Empire, Bob? I didn't catch that, where that was placed when I was saying that. Worshipping the gods. No, they don't need to necessarily worship the gods secretly, as long as they recognize that the Betrayer Queen kind of sits as the ultimate authority in their daily lives. They're free to kind of worship and do whatever they need to secure their afterlives, as long as it doesn't get in the way of the Empire. So there's no one you'd describe as the family jewels. I mean, not presently, but there's time. There's time for family jewels. You're not sorry, but it's fine. I understand. It's a good pun. It's a good pun. Man, it's hot. I'm going to turn my fan on. And hopefully you won't be able to hear it. What else have I done since we've last been on stream? I did some work on... We're zooming way out. Did some work on the region of Eldal. The Night region, yeah. So Eldal, classic kind of Western European medieval period influence, lots of knights and castles and all that kind of standard Fantasyland stuff. And their biggest religious sector is Hagen the warrior, kind of the god of strength and of battle. And there's a strong knightly element in Eldal, primarily in the form of a free company known as the Order of the Silver Gauntlet. That's where the connection to Hagen the warrior comes in. They are big on jousting, celebrating skill, knightliness, all that kind of stuff. And some of the work that I've been doing in the last week has actually been on the city of Mornburg, which, as its name has allusions to, is kind of inspired by Mordheim in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. So this is a city that is drenched in kind of corruption and bad stuff going on, a real history of violence. And I've been developing some of that stuff. Lord Says just came in. What map making software are you using? This is built in Incarnate. So this whole map was done in Incarnate. And then for smaller encounter maps, I use either Incarnate or Dungeon Draft. So in Mornburg, the kind of thing there is very Mordheim inspired. Wanted that feel of the visual aesthetic of Mordheim, of the kind of half timber houses, but also the chance for would-be adventurers to go in and, crush some skulls and ruffle some feathers. Excuse me. And the way that we're going to get through that is this city was the center of a rebellion called the Mendax Rebellion, when a group of people began worshipping one of the kind of evil gods, or a herald of one of the evil gods. And this herald gives power in exchange for kind of physical transformation, so very nurgly. And there was a period of time where the city was basically overrun by cultists, and the Order of the Silver Gauntlet had to come in and wipe them all out, skirmishing in the street like war in this city for, a number of years, enough that this city still hasn't fully recovered from it, and it's still very grimy and gritty. And the Order of the Silver Gauntlet essentially set up their HQ there so that they can permanently monitor for cultists from this kind of corruption cult who seeks power from one of the heralds of the god of corruption, and they get their power in the form of like physical transformations. So they might have, weird wing arms or horrific scythe talons and things like that. And that'll be a cool way to have some drama, have the players arrive there, and they can learn of, secret cults. Who doesn't like secret cults? Is that an oxymoron? Can you have a not secret cult? It's not important. I need to sit down. Albion redeemed an NPC name, the Halabars, with the head of the family called Brish Halabar. I really like that. Let's go ahead and figure out where we can put that. So we already have stuff for glamour. Perfect. We've got a Viscount in Mornburg, but we don't have any information on the name. So we can have Viscount Halavar. And we just hit the follower goal. That is awesome. Thank you very much. So Viscount Halavar. Let's go ahead and make it Viscount Brish Halavar, and then we can link that into an actual article, which it's not going to let me do because I can't see it. So we'll open it up. So Viscount Brish Halavar of Mornburg. Then we go ahead and link that to a template, and that template is going to be an NPC template, and we're going to put that in our beings subcategory. Hello, welcome into the stream. And we're going to go ahead in here and Brish Halavar. We're going to note the location as a Mornburg. Brish is going to be a faction head of the Halavar family, rulers of the city of Mornburg. Slurpee, welcome. This isn't Notion. It's a dedicated world building tool called Legend Keeper, but it is very much inspired by Notion. Braden, the guy that makes this, or is kind of responsible for it, one of the people responsible for it, has said many times, very inspired by Notion. A lot of the syntax in the way that you link things and the way it works, very similar to Notion. I imagine that if you are familiar with Notion, you'd probably pick this up pretty easy. So let's go back over to our map here. It does look very similar to Notion. CEO of Deck says, I'd love to see like a step-by-step guide on how you start to work on world building. Sorry for my broken English. I'm from Germany. Absolutely no need to apologize. I am going to grab you a link because I have a whole YouTube playlist over on my YouTube channel. I'll grab you a direct link to the playlist now to save you some clicking, that walks through the way I built my previous campaign location, the city-states of Ashk, which later became the Cursed Sands, and that walks through my entire process. It's like 19 videos, covers everything from, you may have just heard my incredible loud greetings. So that link will take you to that playlist, and it goes through everything. It goes from the starting kind of formational concepts and how I come up with like those really high level ideas. And then it goes through designing the map. It goes through making factions and gods and making detailed locations, assembling a party specifically for it, designing the starting city, making NPCs and villains, writing an adventure, making holidays for it. Goes through the whole thing of how I approach that element of world building. For the Jewel Cities in particular, after spending a couple years in the campaign setting of Ashk, which is all desert, I very much wanted to have a region that had a more diverse biome. So we have plains and we have jungles and swamps and coastal cities and a bit of desert, and depending on the year we'll probably get some snow in the more southern regions, certainly down in the southern part of the empire, because you can see the kind of, what are they called, the little land fingers that get made from glacial movement. I can never remember what they're called. So I wanted somewhere that had some more variety in biome. And then Peninsula, possibly. I feel like Peninsula might be one thing rather than the little land thingies. A big part of the inspiration from this comes from, I'm in the middle of Fjord. That's the one, Fjord. I'm in the middle of reading the Black Company series by Glenn Cook, and that series does a really good job. That series has a region called the Jewel Cities, and it does a really good job of establishing kind of the interplay between these locations, making each location feel unique and different, and how an individual might experience these different locations and how going through them might feel. And that's where a big part of the inspiration came from. Arathne says, can I ask what's the best way to start producing and writing D&D content on a part or a full-time basis? So let's switch over to Facecam for a little bit. I would say the best way to start with that is probably going to be making some stuff to put up on places like DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG. Initially, you're almost certainly not going to make any real money off it. Both of them take a fairly aggressive percentile cut. DM's Guild takes 50%, Drive-Thru RPG takes 40%, somewhere around there. But they're established marketplaces, and you can make a product and get it in front of people without a huge amount of expense on your part, aside from time. Tools like the GM Binder and homebrew will allow you to do some basic layout stuff that broadly matches the 5th edition style. And then if you wanted to get into more specific layout options, there is a suite of tools called Affinity by Serif is the company. And there's Affinity Publisher, Designer, and Photo. Affinity Publisher is a really good desktop publishing tool. Really, the only thing it lacks is some accessibility options with alt text and stuff like that, but you don't need to worry hugely about that when you're getting started, especially since though the alternative is the Adobe suite, which is super expensive. But I'd say just make some custom things, some items or spells, a couple subclasses, things that are interesting and a little bit different to what's available in the base 5th edition stuff. Put it on sites like DM's Guild and Drive-Thru RPG, and then once you start getting a little bit established and hearing some good things and people are liking what you're doing, then look to either collaborate with other people or get published in a publication that does freelance stuff. Like I have a magazine called SideQuest, which is available on my Patreon, and I have a whole application process for writers from there where writers can go through and do pitches and stuff. And definitely having some previous published stuff over on Drive-Thru RPG or DM's Guild that has some reviews or has one of the medals from having enough sales definitely helps in your favor when you're applying for other jobs like that. Zero of Duck says, damn, never saw this playlist. I'm struggling on world map all the time and don't know how to start. You're very welcome for the tip. Hopefully it will be of a help. A lot of people seem to find that playlist really helpful. Slippy says, I'm working on an open world hex crawl, which is going to be 95% randomly generated locations, and the main quest is the remaining 5% seeded areas. I really like hex crawls. Just the idea of a hex crawl is super cool, and every time I sit down and start making a region, like the Jewel Cities, like Ashk before it, I sit down with my map and I think, this would be really cool to do as a hex crawl. I'd really love to do a West Marches style campaign within the Jewel Cities. So my intention is for this to be my main setting for my weekly game. We're currently in 5th edition, playing through the Nation of Ashk. Players level 15, so we've got maybe 6 months left of that campaign. But when that gets done, I'd love to bring that weekly game over to this location, but then also be able to open it up to maybe once a month having a bunch of other friends come in and do a West Marches style campaign where I just say, right, okay, this Saturday I'm going to run some D&D. Whoever turns up, come in with the character, I'll run you through an event, and the weekly game can kind of see the impacts of these events, and they can kind of have some crossover and, you know, have some of the juice that comes from West Marches style game, which is really cool. I'm going to go ahead here and update our goal, I think. So we've hit our 175 on the old followers. So where do I go to do that? Help me, Twitchy one, Ganobi. There we go, I found it. Cool, so we're going to set a new goal. Start new goal. Followers. Description, progress bar, edit goal. Let's put 200. Let's go big or go home, you know? Custom progress bar start goal, and I think that should just update the goal. Yeah, there we go. It's updated the goal. Look at that. It's like I know what I'm doing. There's a blog called The Alexandrian, which has some very interesting articles about hex crawl systems. A bit more complicated than I'm willing to do, but I'm dumbing it down a bit. The Alexandrian does have some really good articles on there for a bunch of different stuff, both hex crawl, and I think they have some West Marches stuff on there as well. Oh, let's stand. My butt's going square. I'll raise you up so you can see me. One of the benefits of a sit-stand desk, so everybody can actually see what I'm doing. Right then, so let us do some more world building. So I'm going to switch back to our desk view here so we can have a look and see what else we can do. So I'm feeling like maybe we'll stay in Eildal for a little while. So we've just added a Brish Halavar as our Viscount of Mornburg, and Mornburg is our kind of Mordenheim, everything is a nightmare, there's cults everywhere city. But we can have a look and see here. We've got a Slard Lair near the city of Glamour. We also have a Glimnal. I can't remember what a Glimnal is. I think it's a being made of like pure light. Yeah, it's a being made of pure light. So that's rocking around near Glamour as well. But we've got a bunch of other locations here. For pure randomness, I've been in games which use mythic rules. I am not familiar with mythic rules or what they entail. I would love for you to expand upon that. While I beverage myself. So within the realm of Eildal, you can see we go from Glamour here around to Mornburg. A welcome route of ore beers. I love the name. World building's going good. Currently we are trying to figure out some more information of a tiny little sliver of our bigger, wider world here. We're zoomed right in on this small little nation called Eildal, very Western European, classic fantasy land inspired. And we know a couple things about it. We know the name of a couple of the cities and a couple of the towns. We don't really have much more information on that. I think in Roses we might actually. So Roses is a crossroads town. It's also the last major settlement before you move into Iruxis, which is our lizard folk forest. And it is on the road that passes through Iruxis, the one public road, the one road that you can use to pass through the lizard folk territory without having to go all the way around it. Slippy says, do you use any real world cultures as a basis for the nations and cities? Yes, kinda. So sometimes I will take interest from real world areas. It's something I did with Ashk. I was very interested in kind of historic Egypt and some of the mythology of the Middle Eastern region when I was developing that nation. I'm trying to move away from porting real world places one-to-one. So a great example is if Legend Keeper wants to, I think it's my mouse. I think my mouse is the problem. Maybe the batteries are down. So the unclaimed lands down here, the region of Ngawe. This is a rainforest, jungle, swamp region. And I knew that the kind of part of the world that I wanted to take inspiration from for some of the stuff that I was putting here was some of the nations that kind of follow the Congo River in Africa. But I didn't just want to lift those cultures wholesale and put them in my world. I think that does a real disservice to real world cultures. It's a good way to kind of step on toes, and it's a good way to misrepresent cultures that you really don't necessarily know a lot about. But I knew that that's a region of the world that I wanted to kind of evoke the feeling of, wanted to take some inspirations from. So presently, the principal way that I've done that is with language. A lot of the work that I've done thus far has been with language. So I think that's an interesting place to start with world building. Certainly worked for Tolkien. And if it can work for Tolkien, it can work for you. So starting with language, and with the Unclaimed Lands, that is their outsider name. That is the name predominantly that the Empire to the north, the Dusk Empire, gives to them, because the Empire has not claimed these lands, so they are the Unclaimed Lands. But in their native tongue, the region is called Ungawe, and I knew that I wanted some inspiration from kind of regions surrounding the Congo. So I went and I looked up the phonemes of, I believe, Swahili and Zulu, so the sounds of those languages, and I ported them into a conlang generator, so something where you can port in the sounds of a language, all the available sounds, and it will give you words from those available sounds. So in doing that, I was able to generate a big list of words in the Ngawe language that evoke the feeling of languages in the region of the Congo without just taking directly from them. I will sometimes take words and translate them directly. So, for example, the continent of Talavar is a translation of a Hindi word. I believe it's the Hindi word for sword. Because I was looking for inspiration, and kind of that translation is a good way to start. Do you have a link to the conlang generator? I can certainly get one. Let's go ahead and figure out what the one I used was. I believe it might be this one, but I will double check. And that looks about right. Yeah, why not? That is the one. We don't need to worry. So this is the conlang generator that I've been using. You can go fairly simple with it, or you can go quite in depth. It has options for all the phonemes, for the sounds that you can make in a language. So like I said, I took all the available phonemes from Swahili and from Zulu, put them in it, and then let it generate out the words. So it is possible that it will return words that exist in those two languages, because I'm using the phonemes from them. But it means that I have access to thematic words without having to just direct translate. I am trying to do that a little bit less, unless I come across a translation that just really fits. I will often look to translations first for names of people and of locations when I want to evoke a specific feeling, and I want to convey some hidden messaging. So one thing I do like to do, particularly with NPCs, is I will go and take a quality of an NPC. So let's say they're a very proud person. I might go and translate the word proud or pride into a bunch of different languages and see if one of those words pops to me. And if it does, then I'll use that as part of their name, and that in a kind of secondary way tells you something about them. Slippy says I use much less sophisticated of using Google to translate keywords and then changing a few letters in the place name. Exactly. Plumpy says that's cool. I've wanted to create some sort of language for the elves in my world besides the typical Tolkien one. And Bob says I use Google method, though sometimes translating it a few times. So I think that the translating method is absolutely fine. I've done it for years. The main reason I'm trying to move away from it is just because I'm thinking more with the idea of publishing in mind a lot of the time now, and it can be embarrassing if you mistranslate or Google mistranslates for you, which is super common to have. You think that you're presenting a word that means like shining city, and actually you've translated pigsty, and you've just got a city that says pigsty. That's a recent example I read. I think I read that on Twitter this morning, actually. Someone posted a picture of their map or a video of their map or something, and there was a word, there was a place, and if you translated it into Danish and Swedish, I think, you ended up with like a pigsty, and it was meant to be like shining city. Asunder, hello, welcome to the stream. Publishing through SideQuest or a dedicated setting book? Both. Kinda. So initially through SideQuest. So one thing that we've been doing in SideQuest is, and to start with, it was the Ashk Gazetteer. We were focusing on locations specifically in Ashk, and that's kind of morphed now into more of a just every issue you get a fantastic location somewhere that is often a place in Ashk and builds on the lore of Ashk, but that is also intended to be put into your games. Strong, evocative name, some cool background that is untethered enough that you can just pull it wholesale, and some advice on how to place it into your world. So that will continue. More fantastic locations in SideQuest, but I would also really like to do a setting book. So I have got a couple of contacts who live in the part of the world that Ashk is inspired by, and I have spoken to them a couple of times about, hey, at some point in the future I would love to maybe do some work together and help elaborate Ashk from the point of view of someone that is from the region that it's inspired by, because I think that's important. And I would love to publish the Jewel Cities as a setting book in the future, because world building is one of my favorite things to do. It's kind of the reason why I started doing all this. It's one of my earliest kind of desires from a writer's standpoint. I remember when I went to uni to do English and creative writing, and we had a guest lecturer who asked a bunch of people, what is it that you want to do? And what I want to do is I want to do world building, essentially. You know, I want to build the world that the stories take place in, and then, you know, tell the story. The telling of the stories is awesome, but I have always really enjoyed the world building side of things. So publishing settings books would be awesome. I don't think that it will be this year. Probably won't be next year. The next big thing that I want to do is a SideQuest annual. So I want to take the first 12 issues of SideQuest, bundle the content into a book, and make it available in print. Almost certainly it'll go through Kickstarter, because printing is expensive, especially when you want to print a big thick book. And I'd love to have a bunch of stretch goals to make it real fancy, like adding ribbons and making it as high a quality as possible. So that's probably the next big thing we're going to do after I get finished doing my cheat sheets. I'm still working on the stretch goals for the cheat sheets. They're coming along nicely. After that, it'll be a SideQuest annual. Then I currently am in the middle of a super secret project that will be some kind of book that will come to Kickstarter probably early next year. I wanted to get it late summer this year, but then I got COVID, and that kind of threw all the plans down the road. But after that super secret book that's going to come at the start of next year, maybe a setting book. A setting book could be cool, or a compendium kind of book. Here's a bunch of alternate rules for 5th edition, or possibly, and this is the one that I think I'm probably the most excited about, is making my GM Bible a physical thing. So taking all of the information that's in that world building series, the playlist that I linked up in the chat, or taking all of the stuff from my OneNote GM Bible and putting that into a book that's like, okay, you want to make a homebrew campaign? Here's a book, and it'll have a bunch of templates and a bunch of kind of thought processes and guidance and advice and all that kind of stuff. That would be awesome. So I'm going to zoom back down here to Eildal, and we're going to figure some stuff out. So like I said, we have a couple locations. We have Glamour, which is the capital of Eildal. It's where the King Halfdan, lives. It is one of the most prosperous. It used to be called Galena. It's no longer called Galena. It's called Glamour. It's one of the most prosperous, words are hard, cities in the Jewel Cities because of its placement right in the south, so it gets a lot of inbound traffic that trade there before they move up through the cut. We have Mornburg, which is that Mordheim-inspired city. And then we have 3 principal towns that exist so far: Kaya, Roses, and Andred. Really living the future plans. Me too. It's loads of exciting stuff. That'd be cool, because it could be a system agnostic to reach more people. that is exactly the idea. Plumpy, the GM Bible would be system exclusive, much more of a writing tool than a here's how to build a campaign in 5th edition or Pathfinder, or it's just, if you want to make a campaign, here are the kind of things that you want to think about and it'll apply. Or if you want to make a world, here are the things that you want to think about, whether you're doing it for the purposes of an RPG campaign or a book or whatever. Bob says name changes of cities happen, so keep that name something which makes the players have to investigate. Galena is a city somewhere else here. I don't know where. Let's have a look. I think it might be up here, actually. Yeah, there we go, Galena. So I started off with just a bunch of names, and I threw them down, and then I moved them as time went on. So Galena does still exist. It's just, it was down here at Glamour originally. Albionassi says, apologies for not being able to stay along. Great stuff so far. Love hanging out in chat. Take care. Thank you very much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. So we've got Glamour, which is the capital of Eldal. We've got Mornburg, which is our Mordenheim-inspired city. And then I'd really like to get some information on these 3 towns. So my approach so far when building this, so I've been building this in Incarnate, as I've mentioned, and you can see here I've got a bunch of kind of white road markings, and any time 2 or more of those intersect, I make a town. So you can see there's a bunch of places where I have just put down a pin that says town, because I know there's going to be a town there because it's an intersection point between 2 major roads. It means a lot of trade, a lot of people kind of moving in that region. Reasonable place for a town. So in Eldal we have Kaya, Roses, and Andred. Bob says Roses makes me think of the House of Lancaster and the House of York. Quite possibly. I will admit, when I started putting names down, I started with the Jewel Cities thinking from the point of view of kind of minerals and gems and things, which is why we've got a lot of things like opal and pearl and shale and basalt as city names. And my go-to for the name of a city within the Jewel Cities is first thinking from that kind of mineral point of view. And then I thought a nice complement to that for towns would be thinking more in terms of flowers. So I'd already put a couple of places down, and then when it came to place Roses very much got it because rose is a flower. I like having some kind of theme to follow when I'm naming things, just because getting a name kind of on paper, on the page, on the screen can be the hardest part sometimes, the blank page to be conquered, and having a theme at least gives you a starting point to work from, and you can build from that theme. Or you can just throw the theme out and go in a completely different direction, like I've done with most of the towns. So I've also added a whole bunch of other minor details to the map. So if we zoom in here to the town of Andred, you can see next to it there's a little village icon. That village icon exists because I've noted that there is coal and then there are hills. So I've noted resources across the map. Not completely, I've not finished doing it, but I've noted where there are things like gold and silver and mithril, coal, oil, because those can be useful things for our world building purposes to say, right, okay, there is coal in this mountain, a coal mine, which means there is a town, which means I have a location. The coal has to get places, so it's probably going to go down to Mornburg, which means that it's going to go to the main road. So where the village meets the main road, probably going to be a town, and it helps you propagate a map in a semi-realistic way. It's not super realistic, but it adds kind of an internal logic to, well, why is that town placed there? That town is placed there because the coal comes down from the village in the mountains and then it meets the main road, and this is where some kind of processing happens. So it probably arrives kind of unprocessed or kind of collected into Andred, and then out of Andred it will go on great wagons, possibly by the shipping company that will take it to Mornburg and ship it out. So we'll go ahead and make a note of that. So we're going to start off with a secret note, just so I can make kind of scratch notes. And we know that the reason this town exists is because it's important to the local coal trade and has a direct route to Mornburg for the exporting of coal, which means that we know that coal is a major part of the economy, which means we know it's probably going to be a working class town. Lots of miners. Miners. Lots of kind of industry. So kind of heavy industry presence. Bob says, so there are a couple of abandoned villages from where they have taken all the resources or no longer financially viable for whoever owns the mine. Almost certainly. And if we zoom out a little, I think I might have mentioned this in last week's stream, but over here in this part of the world, we've got a town and a village with no name. But I've mentioned that there is a knuckle lave. I can never pronounce the word. Knuckle lave? Knuckle lave? Knuckle lave. There is a monster here, and that monster is real angry because the industry, the oil industry of this town, is dumping its pollutants into the river, which is polluting this river, and the monster's real angry. So there could be a quest there that if the kind of company running this town, running the operation for the oil, doesn't kind of sort themselves out, that creature is going to destroy everything and the company will go out of business and the town will probably be abandoned. And we could absolutely have some abandoned towns and villages elsewhere on the map. You'll see that in some places, where's a good example now? Somewhere over here, I think. I've got ancient tombs and just a marker that says, okay, this would be a good place for an ancient tomb. I can put markers on it, be like, this would be a good place for an abandoned town or village. A moral choice for a situation like that. Exactly. I love putting players in moral quandaries. I love making situations where they have to go through that moral quandary. So, Andred, we know, important to the local coal trade, direct route to Mornburg for the exporting of coal. Coal's a major part of the economy, which means it's a working class town. Lots of miners, heavy industry presence, which means I think we've got to have some company, capital C, company, the man. And, you know, let's play into the stereotype because they exist for a reason. And the company are bad. So some kind of workers' rights issue can pop up and then everyone can get their red berets and rise up against the company. If you want a theme of the nature versus civilization, you can make a homebrew coal elemental to come to life. Coal elementals are well, cool idea. Apologies, have to get on now, but love the progress so far, and thanks again for the advice. You're very welcome. I'm glad that you enjoyed the stream. Hopefully, see you in the next one. Coal golems and coal elementals. Well, good idea. We're gonna throw that right down. So we've got quests. Actually, no, we can make a note of that in Andred. So plot hooks. We've got workers' rights and uprising. We love a good uprising. And then coal elementals / golem / something in the rocks. Oh my god, golems. Something in the rocks. Columns. Columns is such a good name. Now imagine a PC hitting it with a firebolt, lighting it up, and now it does more damage. Absolutely. Columns can be set on fire. burn for a long time, do extra fire damage, and obscure the area around them as they kind of billow smoke. Maybe a druid is leading the uprising. Thinking it would more be kind of just a blue collars workers uprising. So the company, the man in Andred, poor working conditions or some pay dispute, something like that. And then that would be what causes kind of a workers' uprising. But a moral dilemma of if the coal is cut off or if the business goes under, then people freeze. Excellent. Set this during winter so that the slowdown of workers in the mine means less coal, means colder homes. Obviously, the company, capital C, won't go gold. So maybe they have a wizard. I think that's an interesting space for spellcasters to occupy in kind of the social order of things. If you have a town that is reliant on something like coal, and you have a company that's exploiting its workers, and the workers kind of rise up, and there is a cut-off of production of coal, and it means people's homes are going cold for that winter, but the company has a wizard or a spellcaster who can produce flame, then they don't have to worry. They can wait out the workers, and when the winter becomes too harsh and people say, all right, okay, we need coal to live, then the company wins, because the company is evil. So that's an interesting moral quandary to throw in, that kind of threat of, oh, if the workers aren't working, then people will go cold, but not the company. I have closed my chat. There we go, I can see it again. So I feel like pretty good for Andred. We've got an idea of the theme of this town, very much kind of miners' strike, workers' rights. I'm impressed how quickly I immediately went the socialist route on it. I should expect nothing less. So let's think about roses. So roses, and we'll go ahead again and make our little secret here for our scratch note. So roses is the last town before Eruxis, and the one road to rule them all. I saw that error. I may not have acknowledged it, but I saw it. One road to rule them all. Which means that we're going to have taxation and tolls. Got to pay the toll. So whoever the ruler of roses is going to be pretty wealthy. Wealthy ruler. Making money from the toll. Plumpy says, do the lizard folk live outside of there? Could there be some living in roses? There could. I don't imagine it as every lizard folk that you're likely to encounter within the Jewel Cities is going to be within this boundary. This is just kind of their sacred land. Don't forget the toll skippers would be here. The toll skippers absolutely would be here. And I don't know why I haven't... Have I got toll skippers? There we go. It's in the notes for Erexis. So we've got the toll road for merchants and travellers. And I believe somewhere... I created the toll skippers as a faction. So we can go ahead and make a note of that here. So if we... There we go. Toll skippers faction. Operate here... offering a secret path. And our plot hook here could be that the secret path the toll skippers use leads them through the territory of... Yeah, a secret tunnel through the mountain. Leads them through a secret tunnel in the mountain. And through the territory of whatever monster is here. So there's a trail gaunt and there's a naiad. I'm leaning towards the naiad because the naiad is sacred to the lizard folk, to the Orexi. It's a water naiad. They make their home in the lake and they are paid homage to by the local Orexi. So have them go through the territory of the naiad. Naiad. Perfect. So if the players were traveling, never eat shredded wheat, west to east, and they arrived at Roses, they would have the options of paying the toll and taking the toll road through Orexis, through Iloti, and kind of following the path of law. Or they'd have the option to run with the toll skippers, go through the secret underground tunnel, through the underground railroad, and pass through the Naiad's lair and have some kind of confrontation with that. There's also an ancient tomb on the other side. Could have some connection to that. If you wanted to kind of draw a line through and end up at the ancient tomb and then kind of come down out of the forest and down this road here. Could possibly do that. They may well be tasked to find the toll skippers and shut them down. Exactly. So we've got kind of those two factions. We've got the I think the mayor. A mayor is definitely the kind of ruler that I think of when I think of someone that's going to make their money off tolls. So some kind of mayor. So we've got the mayor's faction that could hire them to take down the toll skippers, or we have them side in with the toll skippers and getting a cheaper route through a potentially more dangerous option. Bumpy says, do they bribe the officials, or is there a conflict of them trying to stop the toll skippers? Absolutely a conflict. Toll skippers are not a legal entity. Look, Colquhoun says, or maybe the toll skippers convince the party to change sides. Possibly. Intrigue. Yeah, we love intrigue. The mayor is the leader of the toll skippers and get the money from the tolls as well. Oh, the mayor playing both sides. Oh, we like that idea. Mayor playing both sides. Not necessarily the leader of the toll skippers, but has some connection to the toll skippers and takes a toll from the toll skippers, double dipping. So it could be that the mayor is very much kind of a minor, almost like a vassal to the Orexi. So this toll is for the road that goes through the Orexis territory. So in theory, most if not all of that money should be paid directly to the lizard folk. But the mayor will obviously keep a cut. And if the mayor allows the toll skippers in private to keep operating, even though he publicly has to be like, these are lawbreakers, sick 'em, he can take a toll from the toll skippers, double dip, play both sides, get pretty nice and rich. A nice corrupt mayor, always a good plot hook. So we've got our workers' rights issue in Andred. We've got our corrupt toll skipping, double dipping mayor in Roses. And the only town we've got left currently in Aeldel is Kaya. And I have absolutely nothing for Kaya. So it is just a kind of fork in the road town that you would, if you were coming into Aeldel from the north, you'd either go down to Glamour or down to Mornburg or, to Roses and through the Orexis territory. So there's really no information on Kaya. I imagine it will be a very, kind of a very typical Aeldel town. So the kind of place where you would expect to see all the regular trappings of an Aeldel town. Brunch with Broadway, welcome to the stream. They said a haunted city from the sunken ships in the bay. So, like the sunken ships have all kind of like. Do you mean like the sunken ships? I'm so excited! I've hit my microphone. the sunken ships have all kind of collapsed in on themselves, and they have formed a city out of their like husks and the corpses of these ships. Is that what you have in mind? Because that's what I'm picturing. That all these ships within Fendral's Ruin have kind of collapsed in on themselves, and there is some kind of like faux city. Heck yeah, and the nobility have created a proper city around it. So that could be part of what Kaya does. So Kaya is kind of right in the nook of Fendral's Ruin, and we can tie that in. So we have our ghost ships, and we have our kind of drowner monsters that exist in Fendral's Ruin already. So if we go ahead, and we've got ghost ships that replay in the battle over and over again. If we go ahead and drop a minor location pin here, and Ship City, what a name, location template, Jewel Cities, hidden page, hide that pin, and then hit secret. So many of the ships from the battle. So they've collapsed in on themselves to make a kind of sunken city. We can figure out who lives there. That'll be cool. Maybe there's some sacred position in Kaya called the Watchman, who watches the shores and alerts the town. That's a really cool idea. You have a link. You can have like the Hong Kong ghetto of broken down ships. Yeah, like underwater, all these broken ships have kind of settled and been drawn by the current and smushed together into kind of a city. The skeletons are an official race. It could also make sense to have skeletals, watery undead as the kind of dominant population. I like the idea of Kaya being, we'll get rid of typical. Kaya is anything but typical. So Kaya stands watch over the waters of Fendral's Ruin, where they keep an eye for rising undead from the Ship City. So we could have a high pop of Silver Gauntlet Knights here. Silver Gauntlet. Order of the Silver Gauntlet Warriors to defend the town and watch over the bay. So we go down to key NPCs here, and we can make a note, and we can have that watchman, or like the watchmaster, observation of the bay. Very paranoid, because I think it's funny if this watchmaster is constantly at like threat level 100, like any day now all of these undead are going to come out of the bay and everything will be lost, and if you take even a single moment where you aren't fully focused to the cause, everything will be ruined. It's a very fun place to play with a character. And at threat level 100 all the time. So if anyone wants to spend some channel points and name this watchmaster, then ripe for the naming. Obviously, yeah, definitely stationed in a lighthouse. 100%. So the lighthouse would be a prominent location. So let's think about how a town that's... I don't think this town would have started as kind of a dedicated place to watch the bay from, because it is a crossroads town, or a T-junction, fork in the road. It's a way station town. for people to move on to other places, and then that would have made it convenient. So I think lighthouse probably isn't going to be widely used for ships, because this isn't a city, this isn't a port. At least based on our understanding at the moment, no one's coming into Fentral's Ruin with large ships. What are we naming again? A name for the NPC who serves as the Watchmaster and is responsible for kind of keeping an eye on the bay and making sure the undead from below, where this great battle took place, don't rise up out of the water and come and take control of the land. So just a name for this NPC, whoever they are, the Watchmaster, who's constantly paranoid and always at threat level 100. So I'm thinking the lighthouse isn't necessarily a navigational lighthouse, because we're not going to be having a lot of seaborne trade coming here. So I'm thinking magic, some kind of magic detection lighthouse that scans for undead and ghosts and stuff. Could just be a regular watchtower if a lighthouse would be too big of a thing. Lighthouse wouldn't necessarily be too big of a thing. It's just, it could be constructed with a specific magical purpose. Some kind of magic gem as the focus for the lighthouse. That gives us a potential plot hook then of the magic lighthouse gem that lets the Watchmaster see the ghosts. I like ghost pirates. It's very Scooby-Doo. Is broken somehow, and the players need to fix it. Branch with Broadway has redeemed the NPC Milo Azoric. Perfect. So Milo Azoric, type in what I'm saying. Milo Azoric is going to be our Watchmaster. Now let's go ahead here and create a page for that, and we will go with an NPC template in the beings subcategory hidden article. Go ahead and make that. Click on this. So their location is in Kaya. Milo is a dude. In terms of race and class, Milo Zoric, I am liking the idea that Milo is some kind of smaller creature. I like the idea of just this little guy, like constant threat level, like buzzing about how dangerous everything is, and just the idea of a shorter race kind of rushing around this lighthouse is just inherently funny to me. I'm thinking gnome, the tinkerer angle, the makes sense with kind of the magical apparatus here. So we'll go Milo Zoric, the gnome watcher. There we go. I've remembered how to spell gnome. So Watchmaster of the Magical Lighthouse in Kaya. An obvious suggestion, but maybe these watch people have a high number of paladins and clerics. I like the idea of the lore in Kaya being administered by a cleric, and then we can Elric Dunderbast has a voice like Brian Bessed. Excellent cleric, dwarf cleric. Perfect. So key NPCs, we go Elric Dunderbast. So we go dwarf paladin. Let's go paladin. Let's get some of that righteous zeal there. And if we're going blind, Brian Blessed, I think we need the beard. We need it dwarf. Dwarf paladin in charge of the town's defenses. I like the idea of Elric and Milo being at kind of loggerheads a lot of the time. So Milo is constantly like, oh my god, the ghosts, they'll be here any minute. Elric, you have to like muster all of the troops all of the time and be ready, and Elric is much more pragmatic and is like, well, when the ghosts do come, we'll smite them, but I can't possibly have all of my troops be at maximum readiness all of the time. So go ahead and make a new page. Need to change that to beings, hidden, create and link. Grab a hold of that. We make that into car, and we go dwarf, paladin. We could have some kind of faction here. I don't think it's necessarily necessary. We are going to put smites way too often as the note, and sounds like Brian Blessed. Sounds like a Brian Blessed. I'm going to take the clips out of my hair, take my hair down because it's aggravating me. But no, that is really cool. Kaya is way more interesting of a place than I would have given it credit for. We've got this kind of watchful group of people kind of keeping an eye on Fenjal's Ruin and the kind of ghost ship city. We built this city on ghosts that's in Fenjal's Ruin. Watchers of the Silver Flame, if you need a name for one, and maybe a group of people trying to take control of the undead pirates. Could definitely have some kind of mustering. Someone can't type. Someone mustering the ghosts. The ghosts of Christmas past. The ghosts of battles past. I can't, even in scratch notes, I can't avoid the opportunity for a near pen. That's too good. So having someone trying to control the pirates, definitely a possibility. The town above may be doing the same, but with no communication. Possibly. I like the idea of kind of a town rivalry. Maybe the town above is doing nothing because they're like, well, Kaya's got it, they've got the fancy lighthouse and they've got a paladin. We don't need to worry about that. Which might mean that this town is the one that actually gets attacked. That would be funny. Funny, weird, not funny. Haha. Maybe funny. Haha. Probably funny. Haha. To have that town which sits over the border. This is whatever this region here is going to be that has the City of Charm in it. This town is part of that and not part of Eldal. So the people in Kara are like, well, those people are from a different country. We're not responsible for them. We don't need to worry about them. Milo would also be looking at the town to see what they're doing and react to them. The great city of town. Yeah. So a lot of these are like city, town, because I know that they're going to be something. I just don't know what they are yet. So I have in my incarnate setup. So like these, you can see the icons for Kyra and Roses are exactly the same except for the name. So I have grouped little bundles of icons that I take and put together and use them to say, right, I know there's going to be a town here because it's a crossing of multiple roads. I just don't know what the town's going to be called or anything. Which is why several of these towns, like down in Glamour, that was in my notes originally called Guyana, because originally that's where I thought I was going to be, and not anymore. But the city of town is funny. The city of cities. Every part of this city is its own city. The town of towns. The best town. Just best town. I do like the idea of Milo being kind of crazy paranoid, though. That is crazy paranoid, and even looking to like the idea of Milo wants spies to go to the town to the north and be like, I'm pretty sure they're in league. They're definitely in league with the ghosts. To the town to the north to confirm if they are in league with the ghosts. Just this incredibly paranoid gnome that's like, I'll pay you whatever you want. You just need to find me. Get me pictures of Spider-Man. He's J.K. Simmons. Milo is absolutely J.K. Simmons. Get me pictures of Ghost Man. Ghost Pirate. Plumpy says, could be the person leading the ghosts is an elf, trying to finish whatever the original goal was. And what if the town above has skeletons as soldiers, so Milo's thinks they're allied with pirates. Reality, they're all just free soldiers. And I think Fendrel was an elf. Fendrel was an elf. That's about all we know about Fendrel. The bay that sits between Glamour and Charm is named for the great battle that took place when Fendrel did something. Pirate ghosts are a menace. Just these poor ghosts, like, we died in this horrific battle, we'd just like to move on. And Milo was like, get me pictures of Spider-Man. I love that. Absolutely. I think if there were actual skeleton soldiers in the town to the north, Milo would have a heart attack. He'd pitch a fit. There's no way he could not try and muster an entire great crusade to go and take out actual skeletons, actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf in the town to the north. But no, that's real good. We've got some real solid information and kind of plot elements and hooks to go for all three of these towns. And that pretty much, other than, you know, maybe a little more work on Glamour for some plot hooks and stuff, but Mornburg, Andred, Roses, and Kaya, so 4 out of the 5 principal locations in Isledale have got some development to them, have got some plot hooks. And we don't need like a full picture of what these locations are. The kind of main goal of this is to make it so that, you know, that dartboard method, the players can throw a dart at anywhere on the map and have locations nearby and potential plot hooks and potential monsters nearby to give me a starting point for a campaign and for getting up and running. It doesn't necessarily need to be a full adventure path's worth of content for every location there. Just, you know, the hard work is conquering the blank page and coming up with, well, what is the town of Kaya? And now we know that it's a ghost lighthouse town that is going to have wildly more comedy than I ever expected, and I love it. What time are we going on? So we got about 25 minutes left. I think we'll start winding down. So for the last portion of these streams, what I like to do is have more of like a general Q&A things where people can ask any questions they have, or if there's anything kind of about the world that we've not been looking at specifically here today that you're interested in, we can go and have a look at that. If you have more general questions, we do that. So we'll gear up for that. So if you have questions, kind of get thinking on them. And we'll have a look around and see if there's anything else that we can do in the region of Aeldal. So we know here that we have a Glimnal, a shiny Glimnal. The map was indeed made in Incarnate Slippy. What I'll do is I'll make sure for next stream I've got a bunch of buttons on my stream deck that post like automated messages. I'll make sure to get a Legend Keeper and an Incarnate one, so I can get kind of links to all this stuff into the chat as soon as someone has the question, which will help. So we know there's going to be some Slad and a Glimnal. What CR is a Glimnal? These are probably the question. Well, it's not CR in Pathfinder, is it? It's what level? It's much more convenient. We'll let Nethys run in the background while we have a look and see if there's anywhere else that we can do. So one thing that Aeldal's missing, other than this one marker for hey, there's an ancient tomb here, is more of those smaller points of interest. You know, your ancient tombs. You're just interesting little one-shot potential locations. Battle sites and, you know, tournament grounds and all those kinds of things. So that's something that we'll need to develop out in future. Maybe some kind of hill upon which everyone meets for some kind of festival of tournaments, some game of games, would be kind of cool. Maybe up here, this is a fairly empty spot, so yeah, we're just going to make choices. There's no wrong choices. So we're just going to make a note of game of games. And we're going to go location template. We're going to hide that page, and hide that pin. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a secret. Not with inside there, we're not. Silly goose. Secret. Some kind of hill on which every year on Champions Day, because Champions Day is the Hagen holiday, the tournament day. Glimnall is level 9. Thank you very much for that, Bob. I will make that note. Every year on Champions Day, everyone gets together for a big old tournament. I knew that was not going to be right the first time. For a big old tournament and contest. And it's all good fun and lots of blood. Because what's a tournament without a lot of blood? So we can have our game of games on some kind of hill. It'll be something hill. So, something hill. And probably the site of some great battle of the past, because that's where you get all the best names from. Glimnall is level 9. So that is one thing that I do need to go through and do. I've placed a lot of the monsters here, but I don't have any information on their level, and I need to remember to put their level, just so that as I'm scrolling around and I see like, Desert's Howl, it's a level 19 thing. Probably don't want to put my level 1 party over there, just to make my life a little bit easier. But that's real busy work, and there's like 80 pins here that I want to do, and that's just too much work. Tournament without blood is rather dull affair. Exactly. We need blood for the blood god. Not that Hagen is Khorne, but not that he's not Khorne. Different sides of the same coin. Glorious combat for glory's sake. Glorious combat for, skulls for the skull throne. So I'm really happy with where we've gotten Ealdal up to. Not where I expected to be working on this evening. He's wheat, not corn. Skull for the wheat throne. I thought we would end up doing more Empire stuff, but I am absolutely happy to have worked on Ealdal. We've got some good progress going on. Do your deities have boons and curses for their followers, like most of the Pathfinder 2 gods? There will be. I don't know what they are off the top of my head. So probably most of them have magic items associated with them. So the Everlight has a bow associated with her, the sun bow, I think it's called, which will have been this bow that was created at the end of my last campaign. One of the players was an archer. They had an interaction with the Everlight, the goddess of the sun, and she made a bow from a piece of like white ash, and she ripped a portion of the cloth of her dress and strung it with this cloth made of pure like sunlight, and made this really awesome bow. So now that exists as kind of a mechanical thing tied to that god. And most of them, like Kovaz, who is the god of forging and the god of the dwarves, has like a hammer, and they have boons in that sense. In terms of kind of mechanical boons, I don't know. I've not looked at the Pathfinder stuff in terms of the gods yet, so maybe I should do that and check it out and see if there's some cool stuff going on with mechanical options for the Pathfinder gods, because we love being able to give people options. But yeah, no, I'm really pleased with our progress this evening. I think that we've made a whole bunch of progress on Eldar in particular. And I think we've got a bunch of real interesting stuff there and a lot of cool plot hooks. So as we wind down for the last like 15 minutes here, just do general Q&A stuff. I'm going to stand back up and raise you up with the desk for the last 10-15 minutes here. So if you have general questions, any questions about the world, the jewel cities of Talavar, any questions about my broader homebrew world, if I go ahead and switch back to the desktop here, you can see that I've got a whole world of information here. Some of it is more developed than others. You can see this right-hand continent has got a lot more locations than Talavar because it's been around for longer. But if you have questions about that, general GMing or like general D&D related questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we'll just hang out for like 10-15 minutes, wind down, and finish the evening in a nice chill way. Calm down from all of that nervous Mylar energy. Brunch with Broadway says, I've always wanted to know the general ideas of your continents. That would be cool. And then what D&D races have the most powerful civilizations? That's Slippy. So Brunch, when you say you wanted to know the general idea of the continents, you mean just the high level, here's what's over here? I can do that for sure. So we'll start over here in this big old cracked section because this is where my first campaign took place. This is the land of Valaroth, which is now better known as the Shattered Isles. So this was where my first campaign took place. Very kind of late Roman Empire, Western medieval kind of fantasy land feel to it. Very typical of what you would expect kind of a first D&D campaign to be. Hit a lot of those major beats. As part of that first campaign, the players through no fault of their own, but I don't think that's entirely fair because I do think they have some blame. But the players ended up causing an elemental planar bomb to go off in the capital city of Valaroth, which destroyed everything within a 500-mile radius and completely shattered the country and had a real like Namek Dragon Ball Z vibe where everything's just exploding and there's geysers of volcano lava and it was a bad time. They won, they beat the big bad, but they did blow up the country in the process. So that's Valaroth. It's now known as the Shattered Isles. There's a couple of little locations off it. So this is Freeport, which was once the island of Westport and was a barony of Valaroth. As part of the players' kind of actions in that campaign, they agreed that if they got help from the pirate queen who made her home on that island, that island would get its independence. Same up here, the Marian Isles. Marian are a constructed race that helped in that battle and in that war, the Valaroth Civil War, and they were granted independence afterwards. How much time has passed from the end of the first campaign in the world? So from... you can't see my screen. I did this last week. So this whole blown up area, this is Valaroth. That's what I'm talking about. So Valaroth, blown up. Now the Shattered Isles. This is Freeport, where the Pirate Queen lived, granted its independence. And up here is the Marian Isles, where those constructed peoples were granted their freedom. In terms of how much time has passed from that campaign to the one I'm playing in now, it's about 200 years, which means that a lot of the events from that first campaign are more of a distant memory now. There are some longer-lived creatures that have kind of crossed over. And kind of set up like that. Then beneath them, Pin Dragon is still on. We need to turn that off because that is dangerous. I don't want to move my pins. Underneath Valaroth, we have the nation of Oxdorn. This is the ancestral home of the dwarves. They built this nation kind of out of this mountain range here where the great volcano of Direfal is. This is the kind of heart of the world where the god Kovaz is said to have made the first dwarves. He kind of sculpted them from stone, imbued them with magical metal, and infused life into them. That's how the first dwarves in my setting were born. And it's why when dwarves in my setting age, they don't die of old age. They slowly begin to petrify and turn back into the stone that they were made from. And there is a capital city in Oxthorn underneath which dwarves from generation after generation after generation, they make a pilgrimage back to the capital city, and they go and they live out their final days underneath the city in these grand halls. And when they petrify, they join the terracotta warrior style ranks of, at this point, potentially hundreds of thousands of these petrified dwarves, because their belief system is that one day there will be a great need for all dwarves of all time, and something will grant these petrified dwarves life once more so they can defend the dwarf people. Then we come over to Ashk, which is the desert nation in which my current campaign takes place. And the big old desert, currently in the middle of an apocalypse. So up here, actually, let's go ahead and just open the map so you can actually see it. So again, this map was made in Incarnate. Up here in the city of Hera, the players were on a mission to recover a magic box. They were told the magic box is very dangerous. When they were trying to steal the magic box, another group was trying to steal the magic box. The other group got it first. The players, instead of immediately aggressing them, were like, we'll just put a wall of fire between them and us so we've got a little bit of time, to figure out our game plan. And the enemy player, well, the enemy characters, the rival party, opened the box that they were there to get and unleashed the apocalypse, which is why you can see that there is this darkening of the desert, the chaos wastes. There is a great corruption kind of spreading through the land, and that's what my current campaign is. The players are trying to prevent the end of the world. Excuse me. Slurpy says, do you have any pet creatures that you inject into your world? So currently in my Ash campaign, 2 of the players I think have got little kind of seed pods from a myconid that they met and made friends with, and the myconid gave them little pieces of himself, like grew them like Groot and gave him little pieces. Pets, I'm trying to think. They have a pet baby basilisk at the minute. I don't actually know where they've put this basilisk because they've been plane hopping. So I don't know where the basilisk is right now, but they've got a baby basilisk somewhere with them. Bear with me. That went down entirely the wrong way. So next to Ashk, we have the Deadlands, and this is an area, if you think of Emyn Muil from Lord of the Rings, that kind of impassable labyrinth of razor-sharp rock, all those mountain regions, Deadlands is very much like that. It is home to a lich king, who's said to have eaten the heart of a dragon as part of his ritual to achieve immortality, and that whole region is like filled with undead. Lots of bad energy going on there. Above that, we have the Wilds, which is kind of this whole huge expanse here is collectively known as the Wilds. There's many smaller regions in there, one of which is a Gripply kingdom, which is frog people, led by a former player, or it will have been led by a former player. It's 200 years later now, so that frog's definitely dead. But at one point was led by King Grak of the Gripply. Above that, we have the Everglades, which is the ancestral home of the elves in my setting. So the elves in my setting are like the Eldari. Is that how you say it? Or is that Warhammer? They're slightly different to the mechanical elves. So instead of just having pointy ears, they have kind of like alabaster white skin, like the elves in Hellboy 2. So pure white skin, pure white hair, purple eyes, like long ears. And those are the true elves. Most of the other kind of elves in the setting are really speaking more like half elves. But anyway, the white elves of Inyarin is their capital city. This whole region of the Everglades was plagued by kind of a necromancer who was a former member of the White Elf Court, who kind of went a bit mad with power. Whole bunch of zombies in the forest, and the elves, to prevent kind of their destruction, essentially left the prime material plane and went into the Feywild. So they used magic to kind of cloak all of their cities, and they abandoned the Everglades, went off into the Feywild, and just left like a skeleton crew, pun not intended, of elves to kind of tend to the Everglades. And then the players fixed that problem, and the elves all came back to the Everglades and left a huge power vacuum in the Feywild, which led to a villain that the players have encountered a little bit in this campaign, kind of swooping in and taking up that power vacuum. Then we have the Uzulu Coast, which is where the turtle come from in my setting. Down here to the east of east, is Aparthia, which is a great empire very much inspired by ancient Greece. They were one of the primary antagonists at the start of my Ash campaign until the world ended. Until the apocalypse started, and now the players have got much bigger problems than, an invasion. Then over here we have an island that's known as the Ensouled Conclave. This is a place where Warforged, Marion, any creature that was made and given a soul, or had a soul kind of pulled from the ether, put into them, that it's a conclave where those people are welcome. In my setting, things like Warforged and stuff, for them to operate with a soul, that soul comes from somewhere, and more often than not, a less than savory character rips the soul from the afterlife just indiscriminately and shoves it into these constructs, and it leaves them kind of disorientated. They don't know who they were, they don't know who they are. This is kind of a place for them to congregate. And then up top here we have a pair of nations, Loran and Karamir. Karamir is a nation of vampires, and Loran is kind of the bulwark that keeps the vampires from spreading. So Karamir is like perpetual night, lots of horrific monsters, lots of vampires, and Loran is just kind of, let's stop the vampires from getting everywhere. Then we have Yande, which is a small little ice island that I was developing for my Patreon before I started the Jewel Cities. Now, as a $10 patron on my Patreon tier, as we develop the Jewel Cities and I make content for that, you're going to get that as part of the $10 tier. So I'll drop the link in there for anyone interested in that. Then we have Sothska, which is another ice-themed place. It's where one of the player characters that originally started in my Ash campaign came from. Then we have Sengal, which is a kind of Japanese, Chinese, that kind of East Asian-inspired region that I built for a video a couple of years ago now. And then finally, we have the Akmiri Isles. The Akmiri are the oldest and most powerfully magic race in my world. A great cataclysm destroyed their people, and all the Akmiri that are left were rent from their bodies and now exist as beings of pure energy. Their souls kind of refused to move on, so they kind of stayed on this plane of existence as pure energy, and they tend to like puppet clothes, so they will dress themselves and put clothing on and wear masks and stuff to make the people around them comfortable, but inside they're just big balls of light. And then lastly, we have this little location down here that is called Qatar. No information on that beyond its name. It's kind of big high level view here. And then we have Talabar and the Jewel Cities. There's still plenty of scope for places. We have everything between the Wilds and Loran here on the right hand side of the map that's undeveloped. We've got these two polar regions that I hate the look of, so we'll probably get redesigned in some way, probably merged into just one big polar region, so that when you map it out onto a globe we get an actual pole. And then obviously everything of Talabar west of the Jewel Cities, and these kind of continents, islands down here. What D&D races have the most powerful civilizations? Slurpee. In my setting, it's the Akmiri. The Akmiri were the height of magical power like 1,000 years ago. and then they were betrayed and destroyed, and a lot of the weird kooky magic that exists now comes from one of two places. It comes either from the Akmiri, or from way before that, it comes from beholders. So in my setting, beholders ruled the world for a period of time. There's no concrete information, and very few people are aware of it, but in the deep, deep past, there was a period of time where this corner of the material plane was ruled by the beholders, the all-seeing masters, and they had an empire here for reasons I don't even know. That empire has been shifted out into space, and in my last week's session, actually, my players encountered a bunch of star spawn that were followers of the all-seeing empire. So they're still out there somewhere, but that's where a lot of the kind of really interesting kooky magic stuff comes from in this world, is either from the Beholder Empire or from the Akmiri. Okay, so we're coming about to the... Didn't I have a Beholder in Ashk? There is a Beholder in Ashk. So, in Ashk, in the city of Jabal, in the Voyant, we have the Crown Lord Vardazan, who is a Beholder. There he is with his, central eye and his big award-winning smile. He's Crown Boss there, and the players actually enlisted his help to defeat one of the lieutenants of the corruption just outside of Jabal, and he was relatively helpful in that. He didn't disintegrate any of them, and he gave them a magic carpet, so they were happy. But yeah, we're coming about to the end of the stream here, so if anyone's got any final questions or anything that they want to throw in chat, now is the hour. Do it now or forever hold your peace for like a week until the next stream. While you are all thinking of things to say and things to type away into chat, I'll begin my general roundup. So my name has been Anto. I do these streams hopefully now every week. I just started them up again, where we're going to develop our world of the Jewel Cities. As I mentioned, that link there to Patreon. On my Patreon, I have a monthly magazine called SideQuest. You get every issue, each issue as it's released every month for $5, or all of the back catalogue for $10. And at that $10 tier, as we develop the Jewel Cities, you're going to get access to some information that's kind of prettied up for the Jewel Cities as well. I also have a YouTube channel where I make a whole bunch of videos on general GM advice, on all sorts of world building stuff. I talk about some specific 5e mechanics. I've just started talking about Pathfinder 2nd edition. I really want to start talking about Starfinder, because Starfinder looks so cool. And there's a whole bunch of just general RPG goodness over there. And then I also have a Discord. So if you want to keep chatting with a lot of the people that you've seen in the chat this evening, chatting with me, chatting with general people that are really into RPGs, it's a great place to be. We've got a whole bunch of members, really active mod team to make sure everyone's having a safe and fun time, and it's just a generally cool place to hang out. So if you're interested in that, follow the link and join our Discord server. I think that about covers all of the links I have to have. Doesn't seem anyone has any questions, so we're going to wrap it up there. I really hope that you have enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. I think that we've made some really good progress. I will be streaming again, hopefully, next week. So if you enjoy this, do make sure to hit the follow button and come back next week. But until next time, happy gaming.